early 1930s, an American psychologist was very obsessed with human development. He was very interested in subjects that were just emerging at the time, such as children raised in the wild. When a normal-born human being was raised by animals in the wild, that child was seen to behave like animals. In the light of this information, the doctor who had just had a child had a different question in mind. What would happen if we treated a wild animal like a human and raised it with a human? Winthrop Kellogg set out to put this bold plan into action. First, they had to find a primate close in age to their own baby to make the experiment possible. As luck would have it, they found the opportunity at a primate research station in Florida, affiliated with Yale University. Robert Yorks, the famous primate-alok, had agreed to give Kellogg's a female chimpanzee cub from a monkey colony in Havana as a contribution to the experiment. This 7.5-month-old cub was named Gua. The Kellogg's own son, Donald, is now 10 months old. Therefore, since the age difference between Gua and Donald was only a few months, it seemed possible to medicate them and raise them together under the same conditions. In the summer of 1931, the Kellogg's rented a house near Florida and began preparations. The plan was decided as I told you. They would raise Gua in such a way that he would be indistinguishable from a human baby. By giving both babies the same environmental stimuli, they would observe the potential of one to become human despite its ape nature, and the effects of the other to grow up with a primate despite its human nature. Then they would find out which factor determined their behavior more. If a chimpanzee is raised in a humane environment, but don't think of it as raising a pet, how human can he become if he's treated more or less like a human being? That was the question on their minds. On June 26, 1931, Gua the chimpanzee came home and met the couple's 10-month-old baby, Donald. Both scientists' hearts leapt. This was going to be an experiment that had never been tried before, and the main subject was their own child. From the very first day, the Kellogg's took care to treat Gua not as an animal, but as Donald's twin sister. With Gua's arrival, everything was planned as if there were two babies in the house. The little chimpanzee would wear human clothes and be treated by other people as if she were really human. He would be treated like a baby. In the morning, both babies woke up at the same time, were diapered, dressed, and fed breakfast. Gua was learning to sit next to Donald in the high chair, holding his spoon and eating his pureed breakfast. And over time, she would become incredibly better than Donald at using a spoon and a cup. Donald can't even hold a spoon properly, and the chimp uses a spoon. He could pee without spilling his drink from his cup. In the evening, they were both dressed in their pajamas and put to bed side by side, kissed goodnight, and put to sleep. So don't think of it as taking care of your pet, okay? You may think of her as your child, but here things were being done as if Gua was very much human. Gua was encouraged to learn how to wash her hands, to start toilet training, to play with toys and play fetch, and other mundane but humane behaviors. On the other side, of course, was the couple's little boy Donald. This furry sister, who had come into his life out of nowhere, initially intrigued him, but over time she became the norm. The fact that his parents treated Gua with the same affection made her a natural member of the household in Donald's eyes. But the Kellogg's were also careful to protect Donald from jealousy. They made sure to give them both equal attention, to cuddle them at the same time, and to play together. So Donald really embraced Gua as a brother, not a rival. A human and a chimpanzee cub had indeed begun to grow up together. For the Kelloggs, the days were not only a marathon of parenting, but also of a scientific observation. To maintain the seriousness of the experiment, Father Winthrop Kellogg kept a rigorous daily schedule. Gua and Donald were under observation for 12 hours a day, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. One corner of the house was like a laboratory table. Scales, measuring cups, cards, toys, mirrors, and notebooks were always at hand. The children were being tested for reflexes, depth perception, motor skills, and memory games. And in the first months, Gua's performance was literally dazzling. It was already known that chimpanzees generally mature faster, and Gua was the clearest evidence of this. The little female chimpanzee had surpassed her older brother, Donald, Mr. Big Brother, in motor skills, trying to walk, crawling and running, holding on to things, grasping things. Goa was almost like the super intelligence of human children, but one detail would reveal the sharpest difference between the two. Goa was a monkey, and, as you can imagine, he didn't know how to speak, because the parts of the human brain that allow us to speak, while we are developed because we are human, this part was either very good or non-existent in monkeys, and with vocal anatomy differences and changes when he was young, it seemed unlikely that Halalagoa would be able to speak. But unlike her, Donald slowly began to use words like chow, dad, mom. As much as the couple tried, and even Goa tried to speak, he unfortunately did not have these structural differences that humans have. The purpose of the experiment was not to teach language, but this was an experiment they planned to continue for 5 years. And the lack of language would make a big difference and create a huge obstacle. As Goa was approaching puberty, Adek would stay in the human family for about 4 to 5 years, and Donald would spend his childhood with Goa. But even before the first year, problems began to manifest themselves. Goa seemed to have stalled at some point on his path to becoming human. He behaved as human as his body and brain allowed him to, but he could not progress beyond that, because it wasn't only in the non-human part that he started to fall behind. For example, in a situation that required insight and practicality, such as pulling out a chair to reach a toy, Donald was able to grasp it with a little help, while Goa continued to act through trial and error. So, the ape's adaptive capacity could not keep up with the human offspring. A monkey would go through puberty at the age of 4, whereas a human being would go through puberty at the age of 12 or 14. So, in the early years, while the monkey would progress rapidly and then stall, the human child would develop more slowly, but over a longer period of time. Indeed, at the end of 9 months, Goa seemed to have reached the apparent limits of his humanization journey. But that was not the real problem. This time, the other offspring, Donald, began to drift away from humanity. Perhaps the most striking result of the experiment came from a direction that the Kelloggs had never anticipated. While Goa was adapting to his human family, Donald was adapting to his chimpanzee sister in an unexpected way. Little Donald began to take Goa as a role model. At the age of walking, for example, instead of crawling, Donald began to run four-handed like Goa. For example, when Goa would go out and sit on his Amazon doll, he would make that monkey noise in excitement when he saw the food. And Donald, hearing this monkey sound of his brother, after a while started making the same sound when he was hungry or when he saw food. While the couple was waiting for Goa to become human, their son Donald was gradually adopting monkey mannerisms. Worse still, while Donald's language development should normally have accelerated. During these months, he was gravitating towards the sounds that Gua made instead of human language. His running, walking, his reactions to excitement and fear, his biting people when he was angry, were all an imitation of Gua the monkey. This began to frighten the team doing the study, Donald's family. Gua was also getting stronger as he grew older. Even in infancy, chimpanzees have very strong muscles, but movements that were harmless when they were small became dangerous as Gua grew muscular past the age of 1, whereas when he was younger, he had no problem pulling and pushing Donald when they were playing. Now, when he shook the boy with his powerful muscles, it looked more like he was beating him than playing. So, of course, Goa's intention here was not to hurt his brother. But these actions, which seem harmless to him, are not for Donald. Naturally, the questions on their minds were about what might happen in 3 to 5 months or 2 years if they continue to train. Think of it this way. While a 4 to 5-year-old chimpanzee could easily lift a standard carboy, the probability of a child of the same age and weight as a 5-year-old chimpanzee was close to 0. This physical development in chimpanzees was so strong that in the years to come, Gua could, if he wanted to, knock the experiment to the ground. So, it was an enormous risk, and the experiment was doomed. The expectation was that the Gua would gradually become more and more alike, perhaps acquiring a few human qualities. In part, the opposite was beginning to happen. The physical risk was also becoming too great to ignore. In fact, the couple loved Gua very much like a daughter, but they were clearly mistaken about her ability to change. The fatal experiment was terminated on March 28, 1932, exactly 4 years earlier than planned. Winthrop Kellogg wrote in his diaries that the experiment ended because Quan had reached the human child limit, and Donald's de-development was beginning to suffer. Although not much detail was given in the official statement, it was clear that the D-delay in Donald played a major role in this decision. This unique experiment, which was originally envisioned to last 5 years, ended after only 9 months. Of course, with the end of the experiment came the question of Guan's future. His little shampoo had to leave the family. If you've watched this far, I'd be happy if you subscribed.